Sure, it's so hot in here. Yeah, yeah. I think it's not working. Yeah. It's extremely hot.
No, guys. Okay, colleagues, good afternoon. We are about to start. We still need to get some more people coming in, and hopefully we'll see some more people joining us. So welcome to this third session. My name is Leander Reiters. I'm at the National Clean Production Centre, South Africa, and I'm the manager responsible for our programs on circular economy and sector decarbonization. On today's session, we will be discussing resource efficiency practical applications with the aim of addressing smart and enabling solutions for industry. Of course, our previous session looked at circularity, also on smart and enabling solutions for industry. And in this session, we would like to touch more on how resource efficiency can support and be an enabling solution, and what other smart solutions there are that supports resource efficiency. RECP, as we call it for short, is more than just a technical methodology. It's a mindset, and it's a paradigm shift on how we see industrial processes and the relationships with the environment. So enabling solutions for industry through RECP practices is about redefining what is possible, unlocking untapped potential in existing systems, and also marrying economic viability and environmental responsibility. So our speakers today will, from their perspective, touch on those potential. We have 3 speakers today. We unfortunately have our first speaker is not ready yet. We hope that he will still join us for the session, but we have our second speaker that is ready for today. Our second speaker will be talking on the role of renewable energy aggregation in reducing the risks and cost of decarbonization for industry. And our speaker is the CEO from Africa Green Co., and her name is Anna Haduka. And she will be taking the stage very soon. If you can just put up her bio, that would be great. Thank you very much. Otherwise, people might think I'm going to speak on the topic. So Anna has joined us, and Anna's a qualified lawyer in both England and Wales and the state of New York. She's in infrastructure and energy professional with more than 20 years experience. And she's also trained with Allen and Overy LLP and went on to work for Fulbright, Jaworski LLP, and Trinity International LLP, advising on a diverse range of projects in the energy sector, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa. Anna also negotiated and was involved in a number of renewable energy projects across sub-Saharan Africa, and is an African IPP project finance and PPA risk allocation specialist, and has also worked in an advisory role for power pools in Africa, and is therefore well versed in the opportunities and benefits of regional power trading for risk diversification and power market creation. In March 2015, Anna was appointed by UNIDO as the team leader responsible for a project team comprising of 30 specialists in charge of developing international renewable energy PPP standards as part of the Sustainable Energy for All agenda. And Sustainable Energy for All has done quite great work across Africa and West Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa as well. So with that, I would like to call Anna to the stage, and please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's always difficult after lunch. I'm feeling a bit sleepy, so hopefully all of you are not. And thank you for the kind introduction. The CV always sounds better than the reality is, but much appreciated for the comprehensive introduction. Really a pleasure to be with you today. A very important topic that we see being handled across the region and being underpinned by the recent regulatory changes that we see sweeping across the region in the electricity sector. However, for the first time, we as Greenco see a complete convergence of industrial, mining, renewable energy supply, electricity, and wider decarbonization objectives. The convergence being in the fact that in the countries like South Africa, like Zambia and DRC, where we operate as Greenco, we see not only the importance of the industry in implementing wider decarbonization goals of the world, but in ensuring that enough financing is brought online into the region for further electrification and industrial objectives when it comes to decarbonization targets and making the commodities and the products from South Africa more competitive on the global markets. So what do we see when it comes to decarbonization requirements in South Africa? I think a lot has been talked about that earlier on during the plenary and in the afternoon. It is inevitable, notwithstanding the impressive results on increasing the efficiency of the existing coal fleet by Eskom to facilitate the decrease or the removal of load shedding reality, that the coal power generation will eventually be decommissioned. In order to introduce the required amount of renewable energy into the South African and wider regional electricity system, we require not only a significant amount of new investment, but we require private sector participation to bring that investment on board. And most importantly, we require system lens that will ensure that the required penetration of intermittent supply is able to be absorbed by the transmission and distribution system, both in the country and regionally. For that, We are looking at different scenarios that will impact the industry and how quickly these particular industrial players and overall the country needs to decarbonize. Apologies. So why aggregation? As you may know, there is a lot of discussion in South Africa and the region at the moment on the value of new participants in the electricity sector. Some of these new participants are aggregators, some are traders, some are brokers. The way they're called and the roles and services they provide matters, because otherwise the consumer, which is finally getting choice in South Africa and regionally, will not be able to know what to require of each new player in the market. So why do we think that renewable energy aggregation is important? First and foremost, South Africa has recently enacted the Electricity Act's changes, the regulatory changes, which make a clear signal for the first time in 20 years in this country that the market is being opened up for third-party supply, consumer choice of suppliers, third-party access to the transmission and distribution grids of Eskom and metros and other distributors. That context is very important because this piece of legislation will have very wide impacts and consequences on the behavior of consumers and industry. What it should facilitate is the ability of new private sector aggregators and traders to supply consumers in addition to Eskom. However, in order for that to be done optimally, we need to ensure that Eskom's transmission and distribution revenues are not impacted negatively, and that any new supplier that comes on board appropriately compensates Eskom or the new transmission company of South Africa for their services, be it system operation, wheeling, transfer, and other wires services. Without doing that, we are introducing a new system to the market that will effectively take down the key entity in the South African electricity sector, without which none of us can increase our own supply, because we require or have the dependency on utilizing their network. So the value of aggregators is truly, and traders there, when, one, they're able to showcase the value add to the utility that owns the assets. So that third-party access has to be compensated for. Two, they should be able to show to the customer how are you getting as customers a more flexible choice that allows you to increase prices for electricity, introduce more flexibility, and not incur or replace your own balance sheet when it comes to long-term power purchase obligations being incurred by yourselves directly. When all these three pieces of puzzles are done, then you can showcase that there is a value add of a third-party intermediary, whether an aggregator or a trader, for the electricity and industry in South Africa. So some of the key risks that we see encountered by investors in electricity projects are, of course, the non-payment. The non-payment risk has been one that has been priced in to the REIPP round of South Africa. Not in a way that it's priced in as a generation input cost, but in a way that South African National Treasury has had to guarantee the power purchase obligations of every single PPA signed under the REIPP by Eskom. So who is paying for that exposure on the National Treasury balance sheet? Well, all of you are. I'm a taxpayer in Zambia. I'm paying similar there. But all of you who are taxpayers in this country are feeling the consequences of the cringe of the National Treasury from the perspective of the fact that all Eskom's power purchase obligations need to be guaranteed. Why am I taking us back to that? Because under REIPP 4, round 4, when South African National Treasury started reporting in accordance with the IMF contingent liability reporting obligations, it was an immediate 36% increase overnight of a contingent liability on the National Treasury for Eskom's power purchase obligations. That's an additional $15 billion overnight as a contingent liability on the National Treasury. So we can't replicate that system. But this reality of a National Treasury crunch is what has caused the liberalization requirement for the Electricity Act to be amended to facilitate these third-party players. Why? Because if you have an aggregator and a trader, and they replace Eskom as a buyer of new generation capacity, they are a private player. And no government should be asked to guarantee the obligations of a private entity that is procuring power. So that is key benefit number one. Going back to the pricing issue of showcasing the benefits to the utilities, if you compensate Eskom distribution and transmission or the relevant municipality appropriately for third-party wheeling, you are giving and monetizing their assets because you're utilizing them under the third-party access rules. That's value add number two. Value add number three of renewable energy aggregators and traders is, now going back to you ourselves as industry, that flexibility. We should be the ones making price projections in the future, making forward price curves, and anticipate what risks we can take, and we should be able to give the customers shorter-term power supply contracts and not expect that the customers are suddenly going to replicate the National Treasury of South Africa and put everything that you procure directly from a renewable energy generator on your balance sheet. Because we are then undermining the entire objective of the liberalization agenda of the opening of the market. So that's three key issues which are effectively outlined here on the role of aggregators and power traders. There is another issue, which is, do these aggregators and power traders have the operational risk experience and the financial bankability to actually do what they say they do? I.e., can you buy on a long-term basis as a private sector trader and aggregator? You can only do that if you're bankable. You can only be bankable if you put your own balance sheet on the line. Therefore, any power trader and aggregator that you speak to has to show you that they're bankable. How will they take the payment risk away that you're now shifting to them as a procurer of new electricity? Number two, aggregators and traders have to show the industry that, number one, you live and understand the CBAM rules inside out more than any customer ever will, that you can supply renewable energy certificates to each customer that you supply with, and or that you can trade it on their behalf, because they have to be competitive as industry. So you need to request that. And number three, shorter-term power purchase agreements, because otherwise you're encumbering their balance sheet. So what that entails is two sides of the same coin. Each aggregator and trader, to truly bring value add to the system, needs to show its bankability, the financial and coincide, and operational ability to execute. Meaning, do you have the relevant agreements in place with the utilities? How do you compensate them? Do you have access to a competitive power pool? How do you utilize that and those markets to diversify the risks of payment and therefore to achieve your biggest purpose, which is a price decrease for the customer? We're talking about renewable energy here. Renewable energy, the cost of generation, 70% of that cost is the cost of debt. So if you impact positively on the cost of that debt through your bankability and ability to mitigate risks operationally, you achieve a cheaper tariff for your customer, which is fundamentally where we all need to go. However, I'm sorry to be a bearer of bad news. All of us in this room and all of us in the renewable energy industry are too fixated by the cost of generation. We think that the cost of renewable energy supply will continue decreasing and that all of us as industry will continue to therefore always have a cheaper ability to source third-party supply than that from Eskom. I would argue that in about 4 or 5 years' time, that projection is going to be wrong. Because liberalization of the market means compensation of distribution, transmission, and network operators appropriately for system services, ancillary services, balancing services, and market operation services, meaning that generation input price cost is just going to be one element. And on top of that, we have to add all those services, which have to be unbundled if you want to have third-party supply. So I'm sorry to anticipate that notwithstanding the renewable energy decreasing costs, the ability of private sector suppliers to continue offering 20-30% decrease on WEPs to Eskom tariff to yourselves might not be there in the long term. So that's the bad news. So here is a visual of the current way electricity is procured in the country. You have the utility, being Eskom in this case. You have the government shouldering that liability by backing Eskom's power purchase obligations. You have the resultant contingent liability on the balance sheet of the country, which is already heavily indebted. All of this has led us to the enactment, as I mentioned, of the new amendments to the Electricity Act, which means we are in this era of the brave new world of third-party supply. And you as industry have to navigate that to ensure your own competitiveness. And if you navigate it appropriately, that competitiveness and that decarbonization targets and those commodities will continue to be competitive on the global market, and you will be able to attract through third parties or directly, if your balance sheets are big enough, that renewable energy supply. But please, when it comes to the assessment of the value of aggregators and third parties in the market, you have to remember, do they have the bankability and do they have the operational risk mitigation capacity? Because without that, it's impossible. We're just adding costs without that. Last thing, the region. Sometimes I feel, and please don't take me the wrong way, I get a lot of people sometimes upset by some of the comments that I make, but the region is literally out there. Meaning the Southern African power pool. The most advanced power pool in Africa, based fully on the North Pool, the systems, the software, etc. It has a day-ahead market, weekly market, intraday market. We are currently one of the biggest volume traders on it from the day-ahead volumes perspective alone. That's literally around the corner. Eskom participates in that market on a daily basis. All the utilities do. We do as a private sector trader and aggregator. But why am I telling you about this regional market? Because the electricity amendments to the Act, which was just promulgated by President Ramaphosa literally 2 weeks ago, link the electricity supply industry of South Africa to that of the wider region. What is the value of that? The value of that is that you can further, as a trader and aggregator, diversify your risks by being able to not only take the demand risk of an individual customer in South Africa, but by linking it to trading with the rest of the region, where the demand requirements are huge. Not only that, you can optimize your supply to your customer. You need hydro to balance if you don't have battery energy storage systems in South Africa. You can get it from Mozambique, from Zambia. The system works. It's literally being performed on a daily basis, which is why Eskom New Transmission Company is basing the competitive market of introduction in South Africa on the same model as the Southern African Power Pool. But the learning is already there. So if you are as industry looking at a large-scale project, then you link it to the demand not only here, but to demand in the wider region, especially if you are a customer connected to Eskom's transmission network, because then you can automatically, through relevant licensing processes, access the risk diversification offered to you through the regional markets. Because that's the integrated lens we have to have a look at. How is the transmission development plan going to be developed without that integrated lens? Because the value of that regional power pool for domestic supply to yourselves is immense in the ability of the trader or aggregator to supply you with the flexibility that you need. What do I mean by flexibility? What if you have another COVID? But the industrial shutdown here is earlier than elsewhere. We can give you projections on how long we can keep you whole just by selling into the day-ahead market the excess that you would have committed on a take-or-pay basis once your operations are shut down or not utilizing. What if you have prolonged maintenance and you are buying from an IPP on a take-or-pay basis and you're literally dumping it into the grid? Why? You should be able to sell it, to monetize it. That's how you attract new investment, by showcasing that risk mitigation, both on the payment side, but also on the utilization of the actual electrons, is gone. Because there are market systems to facilitate it being not there anymore. So this is it. It was a bit of quite a lot, I believe, but there is a lot to absorb. But we are superbly excited as Greenco. I was told not to pitch our own company, so I specifically talked about it from the perspective of aggregators and traders, because we all have to show the same value. And there isn't a single company that can ever contribute sufficiently to the development of the required scale of new generation in South Africa alone. So it's a much bigger picture than any single aggregator or trader. What we worry, however, is, God forbid, an aggregator or trader doesn't do their job properly. And we effectively impact or damage the reputability of the market opening that is happening as of now. The market opening that should be giving all of you as industry the choice that you need when it comes to supply from renewable energy third parties in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was really some exciting information and perspectives that you've shared with us. I'm sure a number of people will come and touch base with you afterwards, but I think just the context and the understanding of the broader system and the opportunities and potential should give us a good idea of what is possible. So we'll move on to our next speaker, and our next speaker will be talking about industry applications of green hydrogen. He's from the CSIR Energy Center, and if you could just put his, thank you, his profile. So we will have our first speaker coming up after Ibrahim, and so we will try and make up for time so we have opportunity for questions and answers. But just quickly to share with you a bit more about Ibrahim Takolia. He is significant hydrogen and gas project development experience, focused on the value chains, including with liquefaction and regasification systems, technologies applicable to hydrogen and gas logistics, as well as pipeline systems. He's led projects and dealt with financing business development or deal financing, business development, government and regulatory agency relationships, and deal execution teams covering legal, financial, and technical considerations. Ibrahim's current focus is on the application of his knowledge to assist companies, organizations, and countries to meet net zero targets. Thank you, Ibrahim, and round of applause, please.
Oh, yeah, it is. I found it. Okay, just checking that you can hear me. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I'm currently doing a lot of work with the CSIR on green hydrogen, and one of my colleagues asked me to speak at this presentation today. So I'm going to keep it relatively light in terms of how much in detail we go. But there are some significant applications to green hydrogen in industry, and you would have heard a lot about hydrogen. So I'll just start with an introduction. So there's lots of colors of hydrogen currently going about, and you'll find that we produce black hydrogen from coal, and Sasol produces hydrogen and ammonia as well. And then we have gray hydrogen, which is hydrogen from natural gas, where you don't capture the carbon. Then you get blue hydrogen, where you do capture the carbon from natural gas. And then with green hydrogen, you're producing hydrogen from electricity. And where that becomes, I'm not going to talk about the others, but it just gives you an indication of the different colors of hydrogen. So green hydrogen has applications to South Africa because we have two oceans, the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean, from which you source water, and you have wind and solar power as well, from which we can generate electricity to produce the hydrogen. So we have a lot of positives that would enable hydrogen to be a part of the industrial value chain. The challenges are related to, in South Africa, the challenges of electricity, and Anna talked a few minutes about that, but trading of electricity is a huge opportunity for hydrogen, for green hydrogen, because we can use all the surpluses to produce the hydrogen when nobody else needs it. So there are lots of touch points in terms of what's happening to trading of electricity. So I always like to start, so when we're talking of hydrogen, we're actually talking of hydrogen gas, which is H2. So it's when two hydrogen molecules bond and they become relatively stable. And just so you know, when we search for oil and gas, we're looking for the long chain hydrocarbons, and we're looking for the hydrogen as well. So when we're going into hydrogen, we're actually producing the energy that we need, and just the energy that we need, no carbon and no other emissions. So that's very important to understand in terms of hydrogen. So why would we choose green hydrogen? So green hydrogen comes from renewable energy sources. So that would be your wind and solar. We then convert that hydrogen, that electricity into hydrogen using an electrolyzer at about a 60 to 70% efficiency rate. And from there, you can use the hydrogen in various use cases, including, for example, ammonia, where you can produce fertilizers, and also use ammonia to carry the hydrogen to other countries or regions where there might be demand. For South Africa specifically, there's potential to decarbonize industry. We know of the carbon border adjustment mechanisms that are going to be coming. Initially, they only apply to primary inputs, so you're looking at steel and some other primary inputs. But over the long term, there's initiatives to look at how you account for carbon in every product. So when you go to a supermarket one day in a few years, you're going to pick up your chocolate bar and it will tell you about all of the ingredients in there, but it's also going to tell you how much carbon was used to make that product. And that's going to become very big in the next few years. in terms of accounting for carbon in the production of every product. And at the border gates of different countries, they're going to impose adjustment mechanisms. So for industry, it's going to become extremely, extremely important that we understand accounting for carbon and how we can reduce that carbon. And the challenge for a country like South Africa is we trade with many of the countries that are already starting to look at carbon border adjustment mechanisms. So if we have to change, especially in certain industries like car manufacturing, and even in other areas like we export agricultural products, which will also be in future assessed on their carbon content. So in terms of applications for industry, so hydrogen has applications in different areas. So if we start with transportation, it is widely expected that certain heavy-duty transportation like trucks will favor hydrogen for certain areas, but in vehicles it's a bit more challenging because you need to have a lot of refueling stations. So the uptake in terms of vehicles has been very slow. When it comes to long-range aircraft, meaning when you fly more than 6 hours, it's extremely difficult to put a battery or use any other system. So hydrogen will be the only way you can fly long distance. So there you'll find that there are lots of, or the aircraft manufacturers and other engine designers are looking at hydrogen engines. And then for ships, they're looking at a hydrogen derivative like ammonia or what they call e-methanol for shipping. In industry, there's applications in steel and food as well. And then as a chemical feedstock, used as an energy store, it is not as efficient as a battery, 3% efficiency. But the difference is that if you have a battery system and it's got a capacity of 100 kilowatt hours, you can get 90 kilowatt hours for 1 hour or 30 kilowatt hours for 3 hours. Then it will dissipate. With a hydrogen fuel cell, as long as you have hydrogen, you will have electricity. So if you have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, you'll get about 99 kilowatt hours of electricity if you have the hydrogen to put through the battery. So there is a use case for hydrogen in power to power, especially in South Africa, where we can displace solar energy into the night hours and also route energy into different seasons. You could store the hydrogen as ammonia or another energy carrier in summer, for example, and put it back on the grid in winter. Because South Africa's summer different. There's some commercial and building applications, and then in steel, glass, metallurgy, and food, there are also applications in terms of products. So those are the hydrogen use cases. So if we look at industrial cluster, which UNIDO has done a study on, so these are the industrial clusters and the applications for hydrogen. So and produce the hydrogen, and you can then move it to the different industrial customers and reduce their carbon emissions. If you're in an industrial cluster and you have more than one customer, you can then use that for economies of scale, which will allow you to have a lower price. So hydrogen is being investigated in many industrial clusters around the world as an opportunity for decarbonization. So my final slide is, why should South Africa be excited about hydrogen? We have a large land area, so you find that hydrogen in some countries that are high energy uses, they would need to have significant wind farms, solar farms, and also use significant amounts of water. So South Africa has significant land area. And we also have a very high onshore wind capacity factor. So that's quite important. That's why you don't really hear of South African wind farms going offshore yet, because our onshore wind capacity factor is relatively high. We all know about our solar resources. And And then we have access to Indian and Atlantic Ocean water. And then, one of the challenges is we shouldn't be competing with potable water, which is why I think, using our ocean water is the best way. And it can be used for reindustrialization. South Africa suffered significant deindustrialization for competitive reasons. If we can get a very low price with very low carbon, hydrogen can be used for reindustrialization. And the final thing is technical capability. South Africa has done a lot of work, or have people working in the energy sector, in renewable energy, in new energy fuels. And with Sasol and Fischer-Tropsch, we do have knowledge of these type of energy systems. So thank you very much. Q&A now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. We've made up some good time, and I'm sure there will be a number of questions for you during the Q&A. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our next presenter, Prof. Tom Okello from Walter Sisulu University will be presenting on unlocking Africa's industrial potential, focusing on leadership and STEM convergence for sustainable growth. Tom is a professor at Walter Sisulu University, specializes in environmental management, geographic information systems, and remote sensing. With commitment to sustainable development, he dedicated his career to advancing knowledge and practices in the areas of resource efficiency and cleaner production. His extensive research addresses the intersections of climate change, resource efficiency, and sustainable tourism, and makes an important contribution to academic literature and policy development. A keen marathon runner and cyclist, he embodies the principles of resilience and perseverance in his professional and personal life. He is involved in community, volunteer, and charity work, and emphasizes the importance of environmental responsibility and social justice. His leadership is evident in his publications and books addressing environmental issues and proposing solutions for cleaner, more efficient future. His work emphasizes the critical importance of minimizing environmental impact and also promotes strategies to increase resource efficiency in various sectors. As a passionate advocate of sustainable practices, he inspires students, colleagues, and communities to engage in responsible environmental management and advocate for a balanced and healthy planet. So please, Prof. Tom, please join us on stage, and we will then, following his presentation, it seems like he's leaving.
I thought somebody was really good at doodles, and then I was like...
I will not, unfortunately, be singing a song while he's gone. But it seems like he will be back shortly. We'll give him a few minutes while he's just sorting out the microphone.
Everyone. While I catch my breath, I wasn't trying to prove anything, but just to show you that I'm still agile. I'm not very old, but you see, we cannot avoid to get old. In this house, we are represented by several generations, and the main generations that are here that I can see, we've got generation X, Y, and generation Z. But, well, in the process, I'll speak about that. You'll find that my presentation is a bit multidisciplinary because I was trying and accommodate my audience. So I prepared for you in a simple way. And just to tell you, I didn't have much content. So since morning until now, I've been collecting content. And I really appreciate that I'm speaking now because right from plenary until now, there's been a lot that has been said. And you'll see it from my presentation. How does this work? Okay. Oh, great. Yes, so you've seen the title of my presentation is trying to talk about what we can do as a continent. And the time is now, in the sense that there's no other time. For those who are in touch with life, you know that there's no other second chance. You either do it now or you'll never do it because time is moving. And the beauty about it is that, for those who are aware, is that your timeline is fixed. From the time when you're born, every time you spend, you're moving closer to your destiny. So Africa, and as part of Africa, we've got to realize that it's time now for us to do something. And it's so because if you look at Africa itself, we have potential in the sense that most of our young generation, or most of our generation, although I don't have the actual statistics of our young generation, but the fact is that as a continent, we engage in reproduction. We're actually fulfilling that purpose that God gave us to fill up the world. And it's happening, and that one, in as much as we are fulfilling the purpose, it's also coming with consequences. Now, we have abundant resources. Europe did not take all of it, although we tend to blame to Europe that there's even a good book written said how Europe underdeveloped Africa. But they didn't take everything, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about resources at the moment. But they just showed us that you're living on resources. Do something about it. And with that, you see, Africa also has potential in the sense that there's evidence to show that the economies are growing. Few are stagnating, but economies are growing, and because this is defined by human need, and you have to change with times. Sorry. Great. So the missing link in all this is that we don't have leadership, or if we do have leadership, our leadership needs to be refined because, well, all of us here, you qualify to be leaders, but we're not at the same levels. By whatever qualification you have, you can get into being leader level 1, but you have the ability and the potential to grow to the highest level of leadership as you can. So for those who got into leadership and they are still holding level 1, we don't have time. This is time for us to see how far we can push that. Now, I'll be talking about how you can bring in science, technology, engineering, and all of that. Well, I'm not leaving out the humanities and other disciplines. I'm sure they're covered somewhere. Because if you look at how our education system is trying to... I'll be talking about the world. Hope and faith that I'm not leaving the world as more bad than I left it, but at least I've made my contribution. So, Africa has a lot of potential. There's no single country in Africa that has no potential. Even those who have only deserts, that is potential. And there's something that they can do out of that. And you see, God was fair in the sense that whatever He gave you, He also meant on what you're going to use with what he gave you. If he gave you a desert, he knows how you can use that desert to make your means end. And you find that most of the high oil producing economies in Africa are found in the Sahara Desert whatsoever, in that belt. And then also, so you'd find that besides oil, gas, and other minerals, agriculture, there are even countries which are landlocked. They don't have the natural resources, but they have other ways on how they can. And in as much as it's good to have the younger population, I say it's good, it's an opportunity, but then from my generation, I'm Generation X, in the sense that in my generation, we are holding the older people up like that, and we're trying also to balance the Generation Z. So you find we are the people that will show up at work, will show up to these meetings, will sit in, will make notes, will make recommendations, and at the end of the day, we are the people who are expected to sustain the economy, from a personal economy to the national economy. One good thing about my generation is that we have realized we don't have time. So we're hitting the road every day running, right? Because we don't have an opportunity to learn something new again because we're utilizing what we have. And we're also trying to survive and seek in production, and whatever production it is. Now, what has been proven to work is that our education systems can actually work and can help safeguard the world and push for industrial development in Africa. And one of it is that we require collaboration between the different disciplines that we have, technology, science, mathematics, and all that. And this takes time. And if it's done well, we're able to have a foundation on where we want to take our industries to. And we've actually seen that research and development is key. Whatever you're doing, whether you are just a manager, but include some of basic research that can actually inform your practice. Now, you see, we are at CSIR today, and CSIR has identified itself as a leader in research and development. And we are the people also to support their initiatives to do that. And we should also embrace technology. You know, there are those of us who still believe that they're born before technology, so there's nothing they can do. Well, my friend, I'll tell you something, and you'll remember me for that. There's something that technology will never do for you. I know some of you are wondering what that is, but one thing that technology will never do for you is that it will never leave you and go. That's why, but we'll still use technology to send you away. So